Well, to discuss this, we're joined now by Irish Senator Mark Daly from Fianna Fail, the Republican Party. And in Armagh, Northern Ireland, is Ruth Taillon. She's the director of the Centre for Cross-Border Studies. I thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Mark, let me start with you. The new IRA, so-called, says they're behind the parcel bombs sent to Glasgow, sent to London. Should we all be worried?
Well, I work with two UNESCO world chairs who are experts in preventing violent extremism. And this report and research that we carried out was based on a recommendation of the Irish Parliamentary Committee on the implementation of the Good Friday Agreement. We published a report which I was involved in 2017 on the issue of Brexit and the future of Ireland. Uniting Ireland in Peace and Prosperity was the title of the report. And one of the key recommendations of the report was to look at the issue of how to prevent a return to violence in the run-up to a referendum on a united Ireland. But because of Brexit and the issue around the backstop and the border and the possibility of the border coming back, we expanded the remit of the research to look at what would happen in the event of a hard border coming back onto the island of Ireland because of Brexit. And their clear assertion is, and their research and their findings are, that in the event of a return to a hard border on the island of Ireland, there would be a return to violence. The only issue is the scale of the violence.
Mm-hmm. Ruth, hard border or soft border, have we reached a point where, because Brexit has meandered along for so long and Northern Ireland and the potential for reopening old wounds has sort of simmered for a while, are we going to see tensions no matter what?
Yeah, I don't think you can even at this point separate out the Brexit crisis from the crisis we have here in terms of Northern Ireland not having had a government for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And the two things are kind of mutually reinforcing it and making a particularly toxic situation because we don't have political leadership. We do have a political vacuum here in the north. And there is tension around the lack of certainty around what arrangements are going to be there for Brexit. So yes, there is a problem with the border, but I think as I said on your channel before, there's equally a problem in terms of the peace process, mm-hmm. in terms of the Good Friday Agreement, and also the tensions within Northern Ireland, this sectarian and racist tensions that Brexit just actually can really feed into, mm-hmm. I think.
So, Mark, Ruth is saying the DUP and Sinn Féin also, in not being able to come to an agreement in Stormont, that's contributing to this. Do you agree with that?
It is, but Northern Ireland, as Ruth has said, is divided in many ways, and Brexit is bringing that to a point where it could return to violence, and the scale of the violence is the issue at hand. And the lack of an institution and the government in Northern Ireland being in place is not helping the issue. But there is this issue of two different communities who are not interacting with each other on a daily basis. And the UNESCO World Chairs, as I said, and their research has found that Northern Ireland is in a pre-conflict situation in many ways, because you have communities who are living in the same areas but not interacting with each other. And if the border comes back and you have infrastructure reintroduced on the island, then they will become targets. But the government in Westminster don't seem to care about that, and they in fact have been warned that there could be a return to violence by their own police service. And surveys and opinion polls in Britain, when asked the question, in the event of a return to a hard border due to Brexit and that there would be a return to violence, would you stop Brexit if that was the case? And a majority of people said they still wouldn't stop Brexit, even if it meant a return to violence on this island, which would just show you the madness of Brexit and the lack of concern for the consequences for the people of Ireland, but also in Britain itself, the economic consequences. But there will be consequences, serious consequences on this island if there's a return to a hard border due to Brexit.
Right. And let's listen to, I guess, hardliners from both sides of that divide. A couple of months ago, we made a documentary in Northern Ireland looking at how Brexit could reignite conflict. I spoke with Saru. Now, Saru are seen as a political wing of the new IRA, even though they won't openly admit to it. I spent some time with some of their leadership. Have a little listen to this.
They thought they sorted this out by imprisoning us and by killing our family members and our neighbours, but they didn't. And so long as the country is divided, and so long as British rule is maintained in Ireland by force of arms, it's always going to be resisted. They're not wanted in this country.
So is it justifiable to attack them?
If any occupying force occupies a country by force and uses that force against Indigenous people, those people have a right to resist that occupation, and with force if necessary.
Ruth, the fact that a political group like Saru in the Catholic part of Belfast, for example, murals, advertising, join Saru, right? The fact that these guys are out again openly saying the British forces are an occupying force and it's justifiable and justified to attack them. Has this all been created because of Brexit, Ruth?
No, I think there has always, since the peace agreement, there has always been residual people who did not accept that agreement, who still felt that there was some justification for continuing armed activity. You have to look at those different groups and wonder, do they have any kind of political strategy or even a military strategy? If we look at the things that have, the actions that they have claimed over the last few months, they're not, certainly they don't speak for the majority of people on this island or even within this part of the island. I think most people want the peace process to succeed, and we're worried that because of Brexit in particular, and then combined with the breakdown in the Good Friday institutions here, that things can escalate and that Brexit can be the catalyst for them to escalate.
Yep.
So yes, they will, you know, those groups, I think, actually would, if you ask them what their position on Brexit is that they would actually support Ireland leaving the EU as well.
Right.
They're not going to necessarily say that right now.
Yeah, Mark, I'll get your response to that in a moment. I want you to add it to a response to one of the Protestant loyalists I spoke to in a pub in Belfast. Have a little listen to this.
It's a small minority of people in the north that want
It's the Sinn Féin ones want the All Ireland. If there ever goes an All Ireland, there'll be a civil war.
Would you fight?
Yes. I'm 60 years of age, yes, I would fight. They keep us British.
So, Mark, I'm not just sort of, finding a random clip here and there from random people, right? There were a lot of people that I'd spoken to who did feel as if they were in a pre-conflict stage again. They were gearing up for something. So when you have a 60-year-old man there saying, well, if they want a referendum on a united Ireland, i.e. Catholics in the north and people in the Republic of Ireland, I'm willing to fight to keep us British. The fact that this is happening in the year 2019, what does that tell us?
Well, it tells us that there needs to be engagement with all sides. And as I said, that recommendation of the report by the Irish Parliamentary Committee on the Good Friday Agreement was clear in that what it said was that the government in the South, working with the British government and others, need to do a lot of work in advance of any referendum. The lesson of Brexit is you don't hold a referendum and then try to figure out what the future would look like. And we must learn that lesson, and we must engage with all sides. And I have met with loyalist paramilitary groups and paramilitary leaders, and they are afraid and concerned that there would be a referendum. Some would accept the outcome in the unionist community and the loyalist communities, but the minority, as your clip shows, would not be in favour of accepting that outcome and would use violence to prevent a democratic referendum which would vote for a united Ireland coming into effect. What we are concerned about particularly is that young people who are known as the agreement generation, those who were not born at the time of the Good Friday Agreement or were just very young at the time of the Good Friday Agreement, they have an absence of memory of harm, of the troubles. They have no understanding of the consequences of the troubles. And in some areas, the troubles are glorified in both communities as a period in which you could be someone outstanding if you were involved in a paramilitary group or a member of the British Army or the police service. And then they have no concern for the destruction that could be caused as a result. And that's why there needs to be a lot of engagement now in those most disadvantaged loyalist areas, those who feel they have been left behind by the Good Friday Agreement, they have not benefited from the Good Friday Agreement. And we have to make sure that they're not exploited by paramilitary leaders who want to keep the status quo in terms of Northern Ireland being part of the United Kingdom at all costs, including a cost of a return to violence.
Ruth, would you agree with the fact that there has been a sort of amnesia because the troubles are now a long time ago?
Yes, and I think the points Mark was making about loyalist groups exploiting young people, I think there is equally an argument to be made that there has been very little peace dividend for a lot of communities and young people on the other side as well. And therefore, they are open to being seduced really into joining these things to give them a sense of identity and a sense of purpose. I think we really need to look at that in terms of all the legacies, in terms of just the things that are still not being addressed since over the last 20 years, that we have actually in some ways gone backwards. But there's a lot of work that really needs to be done to give us more social cohesion. And I think that includes all the non-Irish and non-British people who live here as well, which is something very different than what was the case in 1998. The population has changed a lot, and we need to look at how sectarianism has morphed in many cases into racism as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll be keeping a close eye on the situation in Northern Ireland, along the border and within the Republic of Ireland as well. But for the moment, it's been really good getting some deeper insight into the situation with you, Mark Daly and Ruth Taillon. I thank you both for joining us.